Let's be real. If XRP isn't the most controversial coin in crypto, it is at least top 2. And if it dares to call itself second, no other coin will even try to claim first. Back in 2017, XRP was on top of the world. It flipped Ethereum in market cap. Its founders' net worth higher than the Google guys. But then, boom, bear market hits. XRP tanks 90% in a month. Coinbase dropped it like a hot potato. And suddenly, it is a coin everyone is clowning on. Fast forward to now. New president in the house, crypto gets a policy glow up. And guess what? XRP just made it into Trump's official crypto reserve list. So what is really going on here? What is Ripple, the company behind XRP, actually building? And why do people keep saying it is too centralized? Yet, it somehow still ranks higher than BNB, Solana, even Cardano. And now, with stablecoin regulations speeding up, could XRP really pull off another flipping and pass ETH again? Or is it just 2018 waiting to happen all over again? Alright, let's get into it. This is the real story behind XRP. First off, XRP isn't short for Ripple. Ripple is a company, XRP is a token. And even though Ripple Labs started in 2012, the whole idea actually goes way back to 2004. A Canadian developer named Ryan Farger saw a problem. Banks had too much power over who gets the credit. You could have a steady income, but if you were paid in cash, no paper trail means no loan. Basically, the system ignored people who didn't fit their mold. So Ryan built RipplePay, a community-based trust system for lending and payments. No banks, no middlemen, just trust between people. And here's how it worked. Let's say I need $50K loan for a car. The bank says, nah, you don't have a real job. But my friend Jenny knows I'm good for it. Jenny's friend Derek trusts her, and the car seller, he knows and trusts Derek. So boom, we have got a chain of trust. No one fronts the cash, but the deal goes through. No banks, no fees, just social credit, literally. That's a cool idea, but it didn't scale. Because in the real world, you can always build a financial system based on your buddy's trust. So RipplePay kind of fizzled out until a wild crypto genius entered the scene in 2011. Here comes Jed McCaleb. UC Berkeley physics dropout, hardcore builder, early crypto OG. In the early 2000s, before Spotify was even a thing, Jed built eDonkey, a peer-to-peer file sharing site that let people swap music and movies for free. No central servers, just wipes, and college students loved it. Then in 2010, he launched a site to trade magic, the gathering cards online. It was called Mt. Gox. But plot twist, it turned into the world's first massive Bitcoin exchange. Legendary. And yeah, it got hacked years later, but Jed sold it way before that mess. He built the foundation, but someone else wrecked the house. After that, Jed stayed in crypto, but he hated how slow Bitcoin was. Like 10 to 60 minutes just to confirm a transaction. It is great for storing value, sure, but for everyday payments, trash. So he started working on a new kind of ledger. Faster, energy efficient, no mining, just decentralized. Something better than Bitcoin for actual payments. That is when he discovered RipplePay, and it clicked. What if you combine Ryan's trust system with his new tech? You could build something so solid that even banks will have to use it. Ryan wasn't sure about turning his idea into a business, but he saw Jed's potential, so he handed over Ripple's name, the domain, and the community. Jed got to work, and what came out of it was an early version of the XRP ledger, a new kind of infrastructure that would one day touch more than $100 billion, show up in presidential policy, and maybe, just maybe, change the global payments forever. But to go big, Jed needed a business brain, someone who knew finance, regulations, and how to talk to banks, so he brought in Chris Larsen, the founder of Elon, one of the first online lending platforms in the US. And Chris wasn't your typical anti-bank crypto bro. He had a Stanford MBA, worked in finance, total white-collar guy. He knew the system was broken. There's too many fees, too many middlemen, too little transparency. He built Elon to simplify lending. Then he launched Prosper, a peer-to-peer lending marketplace. Let people borrow money from each other, no bank needed. And this guy wasn't trying to burn the system down. He just wanted to make it work better. And here's the thing. Chris Larsen wasn't just some startup bro with a PowerPoint. He already made it before Ripple. His first company, Elon, was straight up legendary. It was backed by SoftBank, Yahoo, and Sequoia Capital, the Avengers of venture capitals. So Elon went public, then got acquired by a major US bank in 2005. By the time he joined Ripple, Chris was already a veteran, a guy who knew how to raise money, work with regulators, and most importantly, get big fast. On the flip side, Jed and his team, super technical, super idealistic, but they were basically just a bunch of coders in hoodies with a dream. So when Chris and Jed linked up, it felt like a perfect combo. You bring the blockchain tech, I bring Wall Street power. Let's flip the entire banking system on its head. And for a minute there, it actually looked like they could meet it. But that piece, it didn't last long. Jed wanted to build Ripple as a tool to liberate people, a system that lets anyone send money without needing banks, governments, or permission. Chris, on the other hand, saw Ripple as an opportunity to upgrade the existing system. He wanted Ripple to be the plumbing behind the scenes, helping banks move money better, faster, and cheaper. So two guys, same tech, but totally different goals. And here's where things got messy. Even though Jed was a co-founder and CTO, Chris and the new investors slowly gained control. More equity, more board seats, more influence. Chris started bringing in allies. Ripple started looking less like a cyberpunk rebellion, more like a fintech startup wearing a tie. Eventually, Jed was like, this isn't what I signed for. So in 2014, he left Ripple and launched a new project, Stellar. And Stellar, in a lot of ways, is a spiritual successor to what Ripple was supposed to be. No banks, no Visa, just internet plus a phone, and you're good to go. It didn't hit the same market cap, but Stellar is still alive and kicking. And Jed, he's low-key a genius. But once he left Ripple and started selling off his XRP, that was it. Ripple's journey officially forked away from open source ideals towards something else, a fully regulated, bank-friendly, enterprise-grade payment network. Now yeah, they lost Jed, the ideological leader, but they kept David Schwartz, the guy who actually built the XRP ledger. To some decentralization maxes, Ripple's move looked like a sellout. But for others, it was the only way blockchain tech could actually scale and be useful. Ripple started hiring lawyers, former bank executives, compliance officers, all the boring but necessary people you need to deal with governments and institutions. They leaned hard into regulations. And guess what? The market loved it. By 2017, crypto was on fire. Ethereum's ERC-20 tokens was everywhere. Bitcoin's halving kicked off a fresh hype cycle as the ICO boom out of control. It felt like every week there was a new coin raising millions off a white paper and a dream. But then there was XRP, a coin older than Ethereum. With actual partnerships, like legit ones, they weren't just rumors. Ripple was working with 12 of the top 50 global banks. Standard Chartered, CIBC, UBS, and while most institutions still hated Bitcoin, SBI Holdings, Japanese financial giant, literally started joint venture with Ripple to build payment systems across Asia. In a world where Whippoorwill was pumping, XRP felt like the grown-up crypto. That's when people started calling XRP the crypto that banks actually like. It had real use cases, real players backing it, and the market responded big time. Between late 2017 and early 2018, XRP pumped 500x. Yeah, 500. At one point, Chris Larsen's net worth passed Mark Zuckerberg and Larry Page. Dude was top 5 richest people on earth, off a coin. And as XRP kept climbing, people legit wondered, wait, this guy about to become the richest man on earth? But no, because right behind that moonshot came a crash, and a hard one. Now me, I didn't touch crypto until late 2018, but by then, the first thing people told me was, don't fall for FOMO, do not learn blockchain, do not use the wallet, just don't chase pumps. Because that's exactly what happened in 2017. People bought XRP not because they believed in Ripple's mission, but because every day it was pumping 30% for a full month. And yeah, maybe you call it bubble on day 1, day 10, day 20, but deep down, you're probably really jealous watching random dudes making life-changing money in a week. You don't want to get rich quick. You were just scared to be left behind. And just like that, as soon as fear took over the market, everything flipped. In early 2018, the SEC started cracking down on ICOs. Founders ghosted, and tokens with no product gone overnight. Bitcoin fell from 19K to 3K. XRP down 90% in 6 months. And then the truth came out. Those bank partnerships, a lot of them weren't even using XRP at all. They were just testing RippleNet's messaging system, basically an email for banks. Useful? Sure. Revolutionary? Not so much. The whole financial institution certified label, turns out some of those partnerships were just research labs poking around with blockchain. Nothing close to real money flows. Then came 2020. Crypto was heating up again. DeFi summer, new bull market. Everything was flying. And just when XRP was finally catching a second wind, boom. SEC lawsuit. They accused Ripple of selling unregistered securities in the form of XRP tokens. So almost overnight, Coinbase, Binance, and other exchanges delisted XRP in the US. And just like that, XRP went from crypto approved by banks to the first major coin under full-blown SEC attack. Even inside the crypto war, people turned on XRP fast. Many people saw it as a centralized sellout, riding the traditional finance coattails. Now let's fast forward to 2022 and 2023 bear market, and Ripple versus SEC lawsuit quietly dragged on with no real progress. It was a forgotten relic of a past hype cycle until something big happened. November 5, 2024, Donald Trump gets reelected, making him the first US president to openly support cryptocurrency. Now, suddenly, everything changes. Donald Trump moves fast. Just as he promised on the campaign trail, SEC Chairman Gary Gensler resigns. He's replaced by Paul Hawkins, who is far more crypto-friendly. The new Treasury Secretary, Scott Bassett, an advocate for stablecoin legislation. The new Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, who is publicly said Bitcoin should be treated like gold or oil, and has close ties with the team behind USDT. It wasn't just a political shift, it was a policy-level overhaul. Trump declares he wants to make the US the global capital of crypto. He pushes for a digital dollar stablecoin. Even more shocking, he announced that 5 cryptocurrency will become part of America's official digital asset reserves, and one of them is XRP. Then, the same month, Bitcoin jumps 30%. XRP skyrockets 500% in just a few weeks, going from $0.5 to $2.7. It becomes the biggest winner of a new bull cycle. This surge is insane. It reminds people of the 2017 bubble. So, why the sudden pump? Well, the removal of Gary Gensler lifted a cloud that had been hanging over Ripple for years. But more importantly, Wall Street started moving into crypto. And unlike early crypto whales who cared about decentralization and ideology, these guys don't care about anything except profit and regulatory clarity. This is the inflection when banks, governments, and institutions finally get green lights to use blockchain tech. They're not looking at Ethereum NFTs or DeFi memes. They're looking at payment rails. And that's exactly the lane Ripple has been quietly building in for over a decade. And suddenly, XRP is hot again. People started asking, wait, what does XRP actually do? Can it really become the blockchain that banks use? But here's the problem. Most retail investors today think crypto means smart contracts plus DeFi plus dApps. That's because since 2020, Ethereum has dominated that narrative. Ripple never cared about building a DeFi ecosystem, and they never tried to create a playground for dApps. Their mission was different from day one. While Ethereum is trying to build a decentralized world from the ground up, Ripple is doing the opposite. They are trying to fix cross-border banking infrastructure from the top down. And if you never had to deal with the international wire transfer, you probably don't know just how broken the system really is. Here's an example. Let's say you're in Tokyo, and you want to send 100K from your Japanese bank account to your friend in Philippines who bank with B Bank. It sounds simple, right? Like just tell both banks and press send. Yeah, not even close. Here's the truth. Banks have separate ledgers. Unless someone physically moves money from bank A to bank B, that transfer can't be completed. That's why they rely on intermediary banks, usually large ones like Citibank in New York, that have relations with both sides. Bank A tells Citibank, hey, please credit 100K to Bank B's account with you. Then Bank A notifies Bank B, check your Citibank account, we just sent you funds. Seems okay so far, but here's where it gets messy. Sometimes Bank A and Bank B don't share the same intermediary. So you might need 2 or more correspondent banks to make that connection. And here's more. Time zone delays, business hours, manual compliance checks, anti-money laundering screenings, and don't forget the currency conversion from yen to USD. Then USD to pesos. Every step adds cost, time, and friction. This outdated infrastructure is called SWIFT. It is a messaging protocol from 1973. It was revolutionary at that time. But now, in 2025, we are annoyed if a USDT transaction takes more than 5 minutes. Yeah, SWIFT is slow, it's expensive, it's manual, it's obsolete. And that's exactly what Ripple set out to fix. So, Ripple took the core idea behind Bitcoin, distributed ledgers, and re-engineered it. Instead of using mining like Bitcoin, XRP runs on its own unique consensus mechanism, the RPCA, or Ripple Protocol Consensus Algorithm. No mining, no energy waste. Instead, XRP validators use something called a unique node list, or UNL. As long as 80% of that nodes on your list agrees on a transaction, it's confirmed. That makes XRP insanely fast, up to 50K transactions per second. And because it's so efficient, it's also super eco-friendly. No miners, no carbon footprint, and that ESG-friendly angle, banks love that. So do the governments. So what Ripple's building is essentially a universal banking ledger, one that eliminates the need for middlemen, automates settlement, and works in real time across borders. And here's the part that most people outside banking miss. Ripple didn't just build a faster network, it also created a system called ODL, or on-demand liquidity, using XRP as a bridge asset to swap between major fiat currencies. What that means is, even if a bank doesn't hold Philippine pesos or Japanese yen, it can still settle international payments by first converting to XRP, then converting XRP into the destination currency. It's fast, cheap, and without needing to hold tons of different currency pairs in the reserve. Basically, it smooths out the forex slippage and reduce liquidity costs in real time. Now, if you're deep in crypto, you might look at XRP and go, it's not even a proper blockchain. But ask yourself this. From a bank's perspective, does this tech solve a real-world problem? Yeah, it absolutely does. Even just on a technical level, Ripple has cracked several of the hardest problems in cross-border payments. But the banking world isn't held back by tech. It is by regulation and relationships. And Ripple understands that. As of today, over 400 financial institutions are using Ripple service, including Bank of America, Standard Chartered, UBS, and American Express. They are all part of RippleNet, and Ripple isn't slowing down. With stablecoin regulations heating up in the US Congress, Ripple announced their own upcoming stablecoin, RLUSD. It will go live in late 2025, but here's the thing. None of this is about what XRP is doing now. It is about XRP is positioned to do next. Once the big banks started moving into blockchain-based settlement, Ripple already had a decade head start. And the future that everyone else is talking about, Ripple is already building it. How do you value that? So in crypto, we don't have price to earnings ratios or discounted cash flow models like we do in traditional finance. We mostly rely on stuff like TVL, user growth, token emissions, and protocol revenue. But XRP doesn't fit into any of those boxes. Why? Because it's not trying to be Ethereum. It is not a DeFi playground. It is a banking ledger designed for institutions, not retail speculation. That also means XRP's price doesn't always reflect what is actually being built, and the market is driven just as much by FOMO and FUD as it is by fundamentals. So instead of trying to calculate a fair price for XRP, let's break down the key drivers that could move its price up or down in the near future. First, size the market. So the global cross-border payments market was worth $194.6 trillion in 2024. That is the total pie. Out of that, around $154 trillion, roughly 80% is wholesale transactions between institutions. That's Ripple's core focus. Now let's say conservatively, Ripple only captures 1% of that $154 trillion. That is still $1.5 trillion annual settlement value. But it gets crazier. At Singapore APEC Summit in June, Ripple CEO Brett Garlinghouse predicted that within 5 years, Ripple could capture 14% of sweeps settlement value. That is around $40 trillion a year. And if that happens, banks will need to hold XRP in their reserves just to settle those transactions. That's built in demand. On top of that, Ripple earns fees from the network, which they can to buy back and burn XRP, tightening the supply and pushing prices higher. Then there's RLUSD. So if stablecoins go mainstream, they're headed that way fast. XRP could become the connective tissue between fiat, stablecoins, and institutional capital. So yeah, XRP is sitting at around $2 today and just be the starting point. That's the reason why many investors believe XRP's inclusion as one of Trump's 5 official digital reserve assets was such a big deal. They were betting on an XRP ETF to unlock the next wave of capital. And that might not be far away. Right now, major US asset managers like Grayscale and Bitwise have already submitted applications to the SEC for XRP ETFs. There are currently 12 pending ETF proposals under review. Given Ripple's close ties with regulators, the fact that Garlinghouse literally had a private dinner with Donald Trump, many people in the market believes approval is just a matter of time. In fact, crypto analyst Eric Bochunas gave XRP ETF an 85% chance of being approved. And according to Polymarket, as of the moment we're recording this, the probability of an XRP ETF being approved in 2025 sits at 86%. If it happens, even if it just attracts 1/10 of the capital of Bitcoin ETF, that is still billions in new inflows into an asset with a 120 billion market cap. That is not a small push. But wait, it doesn't stop here. Historically, XRP's biggest weakness is that it lacked an ecosystem. No DeFi, no NFTs, no on-chain apps. That is because XRP Ledger wasn't designed for community developers. It was designed to be a high-speed settlement layer. But that's about to change. At Apex 2025, Ripple officially announced that an EVM-compatible chain for XRP Ledger will launch in Q2 this year. And this sidechain, built using the Cosmos SDK with a POA consensus, will bridge the gap between XRP's institutional infrastructure and Ethereum's developer ecosystem. If you are a crypto degen, you already know what that means. So, EVM compatibility lets any Ethereum-based app, DeFi, gaming, AI, you name it, deploy directly on XRP sidechain. If Ripple can successfully funnel institutional liquidity onto this new network, it could become a key on-ramp for Wall Street's entry into real-world assets on-chain. And this matters. Institutions want two things: regulatory safety and interoperability. If XRP can offer both, it might just become one of the biggest surprises of this bull cycle. But let's be real, no project is perfect, and there are two big concerns you need to understand before investing in XRP. First, the value capture. People often assume that if a blockchain is successful, its token will be valuable, but that only holds true if the network's success is tied to the token's utility. In equities, it's easy. You own 1% of a company, you own 1% of its profit. In crypto, it's messier. Ethereum solves this by trying ETH directly into its POS consensus. The more ETH you stake, the more rewards and voting power you get. So, if Ethereum grows, ETH captures that value. But with XRP, that connection isn't always so clear. Now here's something most XRP holders don't want to talk about: control. While Ripple loves to call itself decentralized, the XRP ledger uses this thing called the UNL, or unique code list, which basically lets Ripple handpick which validators actually matter. Yeah, technically, anyone can run a validator, but in practice, most people just follow Ripple's recommended list. And if you spin up your own little validator network, congrats. You have just forked yourself out of the real XRP ledger. You are now playing in your own sandbox, totally irrelevant to Ripple's system. Oh, and owning a ton of XRP doesn't give you any power over the network. You could literally buy every last XRP token in existence, and you'll still have zero say in how the payment infrastructure works. All the strategic leverage sits in Ripple's boardroom. Now look, there are other tokens in crypto space that also don't give holders voting rights. Some GameFi tokens, for example, are just used for in-game purchase. And as long as the game is fun and has millions of users, the token has value, no governance needed. But XRP's situation is trickier. Even if Ripple becomes a major player in the global payment industry, will banks actually use XRP? That is a million-dollar question. So let me paint you a picture. Imagine 5 years from now, the world's top banks are all using Ripple's blockchain to settle international payments. It sounds bullish, right? But what if? And this is very possible. They choose to settle those payments using stablecoins like USDC instead of XRP. That is massive risk. Because if banks don't need XRP to use the Ripple network, then what is the utility? And what is driving demand? And where is the buy pressure coming from? So even if Ripple becomes the next Visa of global remittance, that value doesn't necessarily flow back to XRP holders. So stockholders get dividends, e-stakers earn yield, but XRP holders, you are hoping Ripple plays nice. And that's where the value capture question hits hard. Like, without a strong link between the network success and the token's economics, XRP holders are kind left out in the cold. And let's not forget the brutal truth. Competition is coming. Yeah, Ripple is way ahead in crypto-native cross-border payments, but they're not just competing with the next crypto startup. They're up against the old money giants. The SWIFT system is already evolving. Their new ISO 20022 standard goes fully live in late 2025, and they're teaming up with Chainlink to bring blockchain data into traditional banking. JP Morgan is quietly building their own interbank settlement chain. Visa is rolling out a USDC-based settlement layer, and the governments, they are coming in hot with CBDCs. China, Thailand, the UAE, they're not playing around. So yeah, Ripple has got a head start, but the next 2 years, that's the land grab. Whoever can combine low-cost, real-time liquidity and regulatory compliance, that is a player who will own the 2030 market. And let's be real, when crypto finally enters mainstream, you're not just fighting 8-year-old devs on Discord. You are fighting legacy institutions with trillion-dollar war chests and the political connections to bulldoze anyone in their way. Alright guys, if you have made it this far, thank you. XRP has always been one of these cryptos that guests talked about a lot, but never got truly understood. I had to dig through mountains of research to put this together. But if you appreciate the deep dive, please leave a like and subscribe. It helps way more than you think. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!